Good morning. It's like I feel like we're in a court of law, like all rise. Thank you for joining us. Great to be back in the illustrious Red Room. Haven't been here as much as we will be starting in January once again when the cycle begins. But I'm really proud to be able to stand here with some outstanding public servants. And let me talk about our Attorney General, Tish James, who really has embraced the responsibility, our shared responsibility to do whatever we can to protect the citizens of our state. So we'll be talking about what she's going to be announcing momentarily, but I want to thank her for what has really become a genuine, true partnership, and that's how you get the results that have not always happened in the past. Acting Superintendent Steve Nigrelli, New York State Police, you'll be hearing from him on how we're addressing the issue of implementing our new tightened up, stricter, better red flag laws. And I've known Steve a long time, the face of fighting crime in Western New York. And there's been a real difference in places like Western New York, where just data like shootings and murders are down 35% in 1 year. That's a Western New York story. It's also a New York State story. We're approaching those numbers in the next few months, we believe. So County Executive Dan McCoy has joined us as well. Dan McCoy over here, I'm looking up in the wrong direction. Not that you guys look alike. Dan McCoy, good to see you again. I'm just looking over this. Kathy Sheehan, our mayor, thank you. Great to see you in my adopted hometown here. Pat Fahey, our assembly member, and assembly member John McDonald. So thank you for joining us as well. This is all about progress we're making in the fight to eradicate gun violence. And this is really a fight across our nation, and one that is calling all leaders to truly step up, as we have been since I made this one of our top priorities, becoming governor. It's been my priority. It's not a new development. It's something we've focused on with great intensity, really, especially in the early months of 2022, when we started seeing trends that were disturbing across this entire country. And I knew we needed to take strong steps to make sure that we've done everything humanly in our power to protect the citizens of this state. So it is, again, a nationwide gun violence. And sociologists someday will figure this out. But when you look at the fact that even February of 2020, just before the pandemic, if you'd done a survey of concerns of New Yorkers and Americans for that matter, I don't know that crime would have been in the top 2, 3, 4, 5 even. So something happened during this pandemic. And across the country, I don't have my handle on how to explain it, but the human condition and people so disconnected from support systems or whatever the motivation is, and I don't know that right now, and I don't need to know. All I know is that we have seen an increase in crime. We have seen an increase in crime across this country, so that's why back in January, I said, let's do this something that no one has ever done before in the entire country, and that is to create a task force, a team of not just New York partners in fighting crime. All across the country, there are others who are in this fight with us. So we found 9 states, 9 contiguous states, as well as NYPD, Boston PD, who meet with us regularly to literally track the guns that are coming in from other states. And you know why I know they're coming in from other states? Because we don't make them here. They clearly had to cross the state line in order to be in our streets or owned by someone here. So that is the dynamic that has gone not unnoticed by us. It's been a laser focus of our attention, working with NYPD, but also our state police have really stepped up as well. So first in the nation, task force on illegal guns launched last January. As a result, and the numbers were 7,000 last I talked about, we're now up to 8,000. 8,000 illegal guns off the streets. You know, NYPD, our numbers together, what we've done has been extraordinary. We've also decided we have to give more money to law enforcement. They have more needs, they have more demands on their time, we need to support them, so we literally tripled the amount of money going to law enforcement in our budget that I unveiled last January. An historic $227 million in gun violence programs as well. And also tripled all the support for our communities, you know, community-based initiatives that we do know work. Also in our budget, we've expanded bail eligibility for gun crimes, targeted bail changes. Did you actually know that? You probably didn't know that. We made bail changes. Bail reform changes were made in the last budget, especially expanding bail eligibility for gun crimes. And it also made it easier to prosecute gun trafficking. Now that's just a broad overview. I have a lot of details if you care to cover the 10 pages we have of everything we've done on fighting crime. But the bottom line is New Yorkers want to know this. Are you focused on this? Are you taking steps? Are you making a difference? And the answer is yes. We have to be nimble. We have to be responsive to whatever circumstances arise. When we did our budget, we could not have foreseen that on May 14th, I'd be called back to my hometown of Buffalo in the aftermath of a slaughter that occurred in a grocery store 10 minutes from where my husband and I live, the Tops grocery store in East Buffalo. And I was back there again Friday, comforting families, sharing tears, trying to give them hope as we talked about a new memorial in the names of those victims, so what they went through will never, ever be forgotten, and a reminder that we do rise up, and the resilience of those people was extraordinary. The courage they have to show up day after day. So I will never forget them. And our hearts were crushed, and we were still in mourning, but we said we have to take action. We have to take action immediately. I signed into law in the aftermath of that tragedy a nation-leading package that made us have the toughest gun laws in America, and also doing simple things that could not happen before, were not happening before, and truly should happen at the national level. And that is simply saying that teenagers, 18 and 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds as well, should not be able to purchase a military-grade assault weapon in a store in New York State. So we changed the law to raise the age for permits for semi-automatic weapons, enhanced reporting by law enforcement. We don't operate in a vacuum. There are trends where there's guns shared, there's gang activity, and we have to stop the siloization, if that's such a word, that occurs in law enforcement. It's not new, it's historic, but we have to break that down and share more data with state and federal databases, and that's what we started doing as well. Also, the ability to buy large capacity magazines or even body armor. Think back to that Tops grocery store. The man in the store charged with protecting the people, the security guard, he had a vest on. But the vest that was worn by the 18-year-old white supremacist murderer was even stronger. Why he was able to purchase that, instead of being stopped by that security guard doing his job, we'll always question. But going forward, those type of body armor are now, for civilians, is now banned. We established a social media task force, and I thank our Attorney General again for just releasing her report. We said, what can we do? Because there is a radicalization that does go on social media platforms in the dark web. It's true. This is exactly where this particular killer was radicalized in his home, sharing data, showing images of horrific massacres in an effort to inspire others to do the same. So I thank the Attorney General for leaning into this and doing what you need to do to just identify what's going on here and how we can take steps to protect our citizens. But one thing I want to talk about here today, in addition to all this, we strengthened our red flag laws. What are these laws? These laws are intended to keep deadly weapons away from people who are a threat to themselves or to others. It's that simple. And now we've made it easier to obtain a search warrant and temporarily seize dangerous weapons from someone who's deemed an extreme risk. I would say, when again, hearkening back to the Buffalo shooter example, the red flag laws we had at that time weren't enough. They just weren't enough. This teenager had made threats of violence in the past and never should have been able to buy a gun. If this had been tracked down, if the red flag laws had been implemented, he would not have been able to literally walk into a gun shop in his home area, purchase a gun as an 18-year-old, go over to Pennsylvania, acquire a high-capacity magazine, and create a lethal weapon of mass destruction, which is exactly what he did. He fell through the cracks of the system under our pre-existing red flag law. He evaded a law that was designed to stop people just like him. So now, what do? We immediately stepped up, and I signed an executive order that required our state police to file, not optional, but require our state police to file for an extreme risk order of protection if they believe someone could fit that category, be a threat to themselves or to others. And on June 6th, signed a bill into law to codify that, not just for state police, but for all law enforcement in the state of New York. And we expand to cover law enforcement as well as doctors, mental health providers, and even teachers, the people who could see the signs before a tragedy occurs. And now we're seeing the results. The number of orders issued as a result of our action has grown exponentially. So I just wanted to let everyone know that in the months since the executive order and the legislation, the state has now issued nearly 2,000 orders of protection. That's not over years. That's not even a single year. That's since May and June, the number of orders of protection that have been issued. It's more than doubled since the effective date of the original law. We went back in 2019. And on average, we're issuing over 400 a month, compared to 45 a month in the past. Again, this is a small snapshot in time because we've made such a dramatic difference in almost no time at all. And what's most fascinating to me, in each case, in each one of these cases, that's perhaps a crime or an act of violence that didn't occur, something that was prevented. And that's the very reason I took those steps. It's undeniable progress in just 4 months, and it means our red flag laws are working. And just think about last week when I signed a package of bills to protect victims of and survivors of domestic violence, something that you've heard me talk about. It was an issue in my own mother's family. And what we said was, because so many people lose their lives in a domestic or partner relationship, that guns have played a major role in the hands of abusers. So we made sure that in those cases, that a defendant's possession of a firearm can be determined by a judge. When you're issuing that order of protection, and we said, well, why doesn't the judge know whether or not someone has these guns in their home since you've now decided they need to be protected? Well, the answer was they weren't required to ask. Those are the kind of issues we just say, now they'll be asking. Let's just change that with a simple act. So if they do own a gun and a judge determined that possession could be dangerous for an individual, we're just making sure that gun is seized. Like the rest of our gun laws, like the rest of our red flag laws, these are just common sense ways to protect New Yorkers. And I want to thank law enforcement throughout the state. They have had to step up. They've had to be trained. They've had to rethink their mission. But these times call for that. And I want to say this. Our red flag laws rely upon being used in our communities, identifying potential risks and taking necessary action. And in the past, obviously there's legal challenges. Some of these cases have been dismissed, even though there might be good cause, but they're dismissed because there's not been proper legal representation. The police officer shows up without a lawyer on his side, making the case. So fortunately, again, as you find problems, you find the solution. We have an attorney general who agreed to step up and was eager to solve this problem with us. It was just a matter of resources. How do we have more attorneys available to go to court to ensure that these applications are successful instead of being dismissed? So we allocated $4.6 million to the Attorney General's office to hire the staff, the attorneys she needs to go to court with our state police in these court proceedings and make sure that they are able to support the request for an extreme risk order of protection. But that's not all we're doing to help law enforcement. In August, the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services partnered with Everytown for gun safety to provide training. Again, training is critical. Law enforcement, people have been on the job for a long time. They're not as familiar with what the tools are that are available for them to protect the citizens. And so it's a matter of training. Over 800 people participated in this training and 2,400 people watched online. I think that's incredible to get more people understanding the power of these red flag laws to prevent tragedies from happening. Also, the Municipal Police Training Council is working on a model policy for all law enforcement that will be adopted shortly. So our goal is this: train law enforcement, make teachers and medical professionals be aware of the tools that are right there, and it's called the red flag. This is how we keep guns out of the hands of people who could do harm to others. Ending gun violence is one of my very top priorities. I have to find all the areas where the system has not worked before successfully. And I'll continue to be laser focused on this as we go forth, as we have been since my first days in office. And as long as I'm governor, New York State will continue to be at the forefront of this fight. As we look back and think about the inspiration for some of these changes, the tragedy of the mass shooting in Buffalo, or even the Supreme Court's attack on our ability to protect citizens from everyone having a concealed carry weapon wherever they go. A law that was on the books for 108 years, allowing a governor to protect her citizens from individuals randomly carrying guns wherever they choose without any limitation. The only thing that changed was not the law, not our state. It was the Supreme Court that changed. That's it. That's it. And so we're still in court on some of those issues. There's no surprise there, since every time there's any gun legislation issued, probably in the country, but certainly in New York, there's litigation. But I promise to double down on common sense solutions that will really make a difference. We know there's more work to do, but we have the team in place, the desire, and the knowledge that the steps we take today can save lives tomorrow. And with that, let me introduce our great Attorney General, Tish James, to make sure that she can talk about how she can continue her fierce fight to protect New York families throughout this entire state.
Good afternoon. As most of you know, I'm no stranger to gun violence. I've been dealing with this issue all throughout my public career. And so I want to thank Governor Hochul and all of my colleagues in government for bringing us together today as we share one of the critical components of our plan to keep New Yorkers safe from the scourge of gun violence. Hardly a day goes by where there isn't another report of senseless gun violence on our streets or a mass shooting in this country. And this is, unfortunately, a disturbing reality of life in America, but it really should not be that way. It's not inevitable, and we will not be passive spectators as New Yorkers are dying from gun violence and our children are plagued with fear each and every day. And that's why we're here today. Governor Hochul and I, as leaders of the state charged with protecting the health and welfare of every New Yorker, are working tirelessly every day to get guns out of the wrong hands and protect our communities. And we have been using every tool at our disposal to do just that. As the governor just mentioned, our extreme risk protection orders have been working. In the past 7 months, there has been a 165% increase in the total number of temporary and final extreme risk protection orders issued, up to more than 3,400 orders. And that means guns are being taken out of the hands of dangerous individuals. And that means our common sense gun laws are working. And most importantly, that means a potential life is being saved every single time. But in order to support this demand and ensure that these laws continue to flag when someone might pose a danger to themselves or others, the governor, along with the legislature, and I thank the legislature, has provided $4.6 million to the Office of the Attorney General. And these funds are going directly to hire attorneys so that we can represent the state troopers in court and ensure that their brave action is taken when the troopers bravely determine that someone might be a risk. We're using these funds to hire dozens of attorneys and staff across the state who will be dedicated to representing our police and protecting them and our communities. And while we have already started this important work, these additional attorneys will be located in regions across the state because this is an issue that is impacting all of us. As you know, we have 13 regional offices all throughout the state of New York. And so we know that these laws work. We know that they can save lives and prevent tragedies from occurring. And we are putting in the work to do just that. As public officials, we were elected to solve problems and to address the needs of the people. Prayers alone won't save lives. Prayers alone won't save lives from gun violence. And cowardlessness is not part of the job description. So today, New York is acting, and Governor Hochul and I are acting. We are taking basic common sense steps to protect our residents and doing everything in our power to keep these weapons of death away from dangerous people and to protect our communities from gun violence. Lives are at stake every single day, and we will continue to take decisive action every day to combat this crisis. Thank you, Governor Hochul.
Now I'd like to call up Acting New York State Police Superintendent Stephen Nigrelli to talk about specifically our state efforts.
Good afternoon. Governor Hochul, thank you for your continued support of the New York State Police and your commitment to keeping all New Yorkers safe. To Attorney General James, we appreciate your efforts in helping us ensure that the state's red flag laws is effective. Since Governor Hochul has prioritizing fighting gun violence, the New York State Police has started several initiatives to increase our focus on removing illegal guns from the streets of New York and ultimately keeping New Yorkers safe. This included our deployment of our Community Stabilization Unit to upstate cities where crimes were at their highest. Troopers responded. Intelligence sharing through our interstate gun task force. You can't measure the success in sharing intelligence with our 8 other state partners. Regionally, not only New York State, but the United States is better for this task force. And lastly, the creation of our Gun Traffic Intelligence Unit within the New York State Police. And because of all these initiatives, we are on pace for a historic number of guns seized by the New York State Police. The red flag law is another important tool for reducing gun violence because it allows us to take immediate action when someone is threatening others or themselves. The red flag law allows it, with the judge's order, to temporarily remove guns and prevent violence by removing access to firearms. All the while giving the criminal justice system and our mental health professionals time to provide help for those in crisis. Since the issuance of the executive order, the New York State Police has applied for 339 orders. It's more than 3 times the applications we applied for last year alone. In those cases that we applied for, 65% have resulted in guns being seized. In the cases that we've presented, judges have approved 86% of all applications made by state police members, but not all. 86%, but not all. That's why we are so pleased to hear the Attorney General's office will be handling these cases as we move through the court. Until now, as alluded to earlier, state police members have been making the ERPO application and representing themselves in court throughout the proceedings. There's no doubt in my mind, with the assistance and legal expertise of the Attorney General's office, we can maximize the use of this law and further succeed in our ultimate goal of keeping New York safe. I'd like to once again thank Governor Hochul, Attorney General James, for the support of the state police, not only this, but on all topics. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank all of you for attending, especially our partners in state legislature. This doesn't happen without all of you, and I'm grateful for your support because we've been joined together in our united front to make sure that we make our streets safer. So thank you for what you do and will continue to do in the next session. Thank you for attending. At this point, we'll be taking on-topic questions while I have the on-topic experts with me, and then we can move into other topics once everyone else has had their time here.
Governor,
We're following an order here. Thank you.
yeah,
Okay, this is, as long as she's next, okay? I don't want to take it away from her. This is the second time in a couple of days that you've been focusing on anti-crime issues. Wondering if this is a concession that Congressman Zeldin, your opponent, is getting the upper hand on these issues?
No, I think what you think, I think maybe everyone didn't hear what I was talking about earlier, which was the sequence of time that we've been focused on this. I mean, being in the subway on January 6th, not that January 6th, the following year, January 6th with Mayor Adams and law enforcement and the chief of police to talk about subway safety back in January. We went there again in February. We passed our laws in March and April. We made these changes to our state laws back in May and June. And we did a report on how we're doing with ghost guns, and we'll be talking more about ghost guns, the banning. So I think if there's a fair assessment of what's been going on, it's been a continuum of informing the public on what we've been doing. And as we hit the third quarter of this year, which is the end of September, we look at the data every quarter, and now there's a story we should be telling people. And it also, opportunities like this allow us to educate those who may not be as aware. Get the word out to people in school settings and medical settings about the tools that are available to them. So I don't think it's an accurate characterization to say we just started talking about crime when you have to look at the facts of just the work that we've done over the last year and the times we've talked to the press about this.
You don't think he's getting ahead of you on this issue?
I'm not letting the political theater out there affect what we've done. This is not a new issue for me, and I think that's well established.
But Governor, thank you. You have held several news conferences on crime just in the last weeks, and previously you said that you don't respond to polling numbers, but polling numbers have shown that crime is now a central issue, and all of a sudden you're holding news conferences about crime, you have a new ad out about crime, so it looks like you are responding to polling numbers and the political theater.
Did you see my ad on crime back in June? Okay, that was a few months ago. I had it, so I just.
Also, the last time we talked about crime at a gun conference, I asked you about data because a lot of your response to the crime issue is passing laws to make it harder to get a gun. Have you come up with any data that shows all of these measures you're taking to make it more difficult to get a concealed carry, to make it more difficult to get a gun, is actually stopping crime? Because in the subways, we see people pushing people onto the subway tracks. They're not even using guns in some of these cases.
Right.
Is this working?
Well, let me talk to you about the gun side, which is where a governor has more say in our statewide effort to get illegal guns off the streets. I mean, we're the ones, and I speak to the superintendent about this, we're the ones that are most likely to be able to stop guns from coming across state borders. I mean, we don't have other law enforcement there. I said we're talking about getting guns that are coming up from gun shows in Pennsylvania, for example. That's the responsibility we have. So when you talk about success, I think 8,000 guns off the streets in 1 year because of this is success. But let's look at some other metrics, and I'm glad you asked, because I think the more the viewers understand this, I mean, I deal with two things here. I deal with real facts, and I deal with people's fear, and I address both. The real facts is that we've been so aggressive about this, driving down gun violence with getting guns off the streets and all these measures that we can go through again, but I think they're well established, is that nationwide, gun violence in terms of murders and shootings are down 2%. Okay, it's been a national phenomenon. I think everybody knows that. New York State, it's down 14%. Long Island, it's down 18%. My hometown of Buffalo is down 35%. So I think that's another data point which will help your viewers understand that real progress has been made, and I'm proud of that. But I will never stand here and say we're done. You know, we're better than the rest of the country, yes. But if people are still anxious, have fear about what's going on, that's why I'm supportive of local law enforcement, whether it's in New York City, Rochester, Syracuse, where I've embedded now, bringing state police to help the local law enforcement officials and the local elected officials who primarily are responsible for this. I'm not walking away from that. I'm saying, tell me how I can help you. And we've done just that.
Sorry to follow up, but why, okay, you've been called on by the mayor and you've been called on by the Albany County DA to address criminal justice reform laws that they say are the reason that the crime keeps occurring. And you haven't met with the DA in Albany County, and you didn't hold a special session when you were called on repeatedly to do so. So are you doing this the wrong way? Is guns the reason for the crime, or is it something else? Because you've done a lot, but the crime's still happening.
But the crime related to guns is going down. We've been focusing on getting guns off the streets and empowering local law enforcement and giving them more money and changing the red flag laws and taking assault weapons out of the hands of teenagers. We're doing all that, and the result in that space, which I have the most authority over because I oversee the state police and work with the legislature on changing, we're seeing progress there. But human emotion is different. I understand that. And I'm doing what I can to have events like this to let people know we're out there fighting for you. We're there to help you. I stand in a subway with Mayor Adams to talk about, I understand we can help you. We want to have a greater police presence. Let me amplify what you're doing by sending more transit police that I oversee to help NYPD. That's what good government is all about. It's cooperation. It's also saying there's a lot of fear on our subways. 40% of those most recent homicides on the subways are related to people with severe mental health problems. So what do? We don't just say, well, that's the mayor's problem. It's like, okay, mayor, we're part of the same team here. We'll help you, and let's get you more beds available for those who've been identified as the most threatening, people that are seriously ill, threatening for themselves, but also for the bystanders, the people who are just trying to get to their jobs every day. So I would think it's a fair assessment to just look at the whole picture here and also know that I'm not saying we're done yet at all, but there was a stabilization in subway incidences. The mayor has talked about that, the fact that the number is consistent with past years. But when you have some very high-profile, frightening cases all in a short time, despite the statistics that tell you it averages out, I understand fear. And that's why the more we're doing together in light of those more recent horrific cases, I want that to assure people that we're not saying we're done, we're saying we're laser focused on this. And that's what's going on here.
Okay, Jimmy, special session, and let's have the special session. Jimmy, go ahead.
Governor, kind of a two-prong. First, for you, you've talked about the increase in the number of ERPOs as a result of your order for the state police. Do you have any consideration or steps that you're planning to take to sort of extend that mandate to local law enforcement agencies, be they county sheriffs, NYPD? And then the second part for Acting Superintendent Negrelli. First, welcome, congratulations on your appointment. We know that state police had contact with Peyton Gendron in the spring of 2021. I believe took him for a mental health evaluation, but no ERPO was ever filed. I understood that that was under investigation by the state police earlier this year. So what can you tell us that you've learned about that incident? And I think it's probably a failure to say that no ERPO was filed.
Jimmy, I'll answer the first part of your question, and that is real simple. What you suggested, that there be authority for local policing agencies to use this, is correct, and that's why not only in May did I say immediately after the massacre in Buffalo, I want the state police to not have an option, but just you're required to do this under the circumstances, and that's the law I signed on June 6th. June 6th going forward, we told local law enforcement to do this as well. And so that's why you see that dramatic increase in the number of cases filed just since that time, and that's what we're showing in our graphics. So you're on target with that, and there's also the other element of, do they all know about it? I mean, it's great to have the power, but if no one tells you that it's changed, then you may not be properly using it. And I'm really proud of the fact that 30 of our counties have had a 100% increase in extreme risk orders of protection sought and have been successful. So we have data that shows what else is going around the state. So it is a newer tool in the sense of they haven't been required to do it, but that's what our state law does too. What's that? I'm sorry. Sure.
Thank you for the well wishes. The state police has issued a statement on this topic in the past. I'm going to refer back to that just because of this. It's still an ongoing criminal investigation, and I think it wouldn't be wise for me to comment at this time. I think that's a fair response at this time.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Governor, I'm curious if you think that you and your political campaign have been able to effectively communicate on the issue of crime, on the issue of your record on crime. Is that in any way, do you think that is in any way leading to the polling that is showing the gap closing between yourself and Congressman Zeldin? And if that's the case, is there, what can you do in these closing 2 weeks to change that?
We have the record to talk about, absolutely. You know, there is a record, and I've been proud to talk about this. I go out to the public. I do press conferences multiple times a week. I'm out there. I'm available to the press. I answer questions. What is covered is not up to me. That's where I don't have the ability to determine what makes a headline, what makes a story, and what doesn't. So I will continue engaging the public through all of you as representatives of the media, and the characterizations is something, and where the emphasis is put is something I really can't control. But we're doing what we can to let people know that this has been a priority of mine since the very beginning, and that is not news. That is not a news flash. We have evidence that show we've been talking about this literally since last fall. Had a strategy back in January, worked again during the budget, worked again in the spring, worked again in the summer, throughout the fall, and so here we are. So I don't want to, this is the on-topic section of our presentation here, but I know it's a political season, but I assure you, I've been doing this long before I was even the candidate for governor, before I became the nominee of the Democratic Party, long before.
Zach, and then we'll switch.
For the Attorney General. I think last week you said we need to address a wide range of issues, including but not limited to looking at bail reform. What did you mean by that in terms of closing potential loopholes that might allow repeat offenders to walk free?
So let me just say this. As the Attorney General, my office has removed over 3,500 guns off of the streets of New York State. 2, we have filed actions against gun manufacturers and gun distributors. 3, we've joined with law enforcement all across the state to take down gangs, individuals who've been trafficking in drugs and opioids, etc. As I stated earlier, I'm no stranger to gun violence. As a former city council member, I was the first city council member to put cameras in public housing, the first individual to work with then Mayor Bloomberg on ShotSpotter, to focus on a wide range of issues, including calling for body-worn cameras on police officers when I was a city council member. And I've attended too many funerals. I've had to hold too many mothers and fathers over open caskets. This is not new to me. I also held a hearing last year in regards to the issue of mental illness and the impact that it is having with respect to the criminal justice system. What I said last week in Buffalo was that we cannot look at bail reform in isolation. We need to look at a wide range of other issues, including but not limited to our mental health system, the lack of pretrial services, the lack of probation officers, the lack of correction officers, and the list goes on and on and on. To be fixated on bail reform without regards to looking at data, I think is a misstep, and I think the adage goes, you're looking at the forest for the trees.
So were you misinterpreted then when people
No,
reported
by no means.
changing the cash bail laws?
No, I wasn't misinterpreted at all. What I said was we need to look at a panoply of issues, including but not limited to bail reform. But before we even get there, can we look at the other issues which are drivers of crime as well?
And what do you actually specifically mean by that? Like, my question was, what did you mean by looking at bail?
I said we can look at bail reform and look at the data. Let's analyze the data. And I've said that before, prior to my visit to Buffalo.
I can actually help amplify that. I just want to add something to that. There is no daylight between our two positions. If you look at all the transcripts of the hundreds of times I've talked about this, I have said we're willing to look at the laws again. I've said this, but let's look at the data. Our positions are 100% consistent. They've only been in effect since May 9th. May 9th, that judges and district attorneys have been empowered to go back to the old bail laws that were in place when it comes to gun cases and repeat offenders and when there's an order of protection and when there's other circumstances. So I think it's understandable that we will look at the data. We'll see what's working. We'll see what's not working. And that's why we're absolutely 100% consistent on that position.
When?
When the legislature meets, because then we'll have 6 months of data, which I think is reasonable. 6 months of data is still a small sampling, but we'll be able to see what's actually going on and look at the nationwide phenomenon of what's happening. All I know is that our murders and shootings are way down compared to the national average. So we'll just look at the broad picture of what we can continue to do as we've been doing since the first day, which is to make New Yorkers safer.
Democratic district attorney, if a Democratic district attorney telling you that it needs to be addressed now, why wouldn't you address it now?
There's a cycle, we'll address it at the appropriate time. I've said that all along. Thank you, everybody. And on topic, do you need them back here? Okay, do you want them back? Do you want it, is it anything for them? Oh, just for me, okay. Well, then you can. I just want to make sure you didn't need one of the two of them before.
They wanted to answer it, they can as well. I've been trying to ask it for a little while here.
Okay.
What
recourse should individuals, citizens of New York, have if law enforcement do not follow the rules and issue a red flag, issue an ERPO, when they have the opportunity to and when the law compels them to do so? What do you think should be in place for individuals to?
There's an appeal system as well. There is absolutely due process involved in this, that people can appeal this. That's why the first initiative is a temporary order when the argument's made, but before it becomes a permanent order, you need more evidence, you go through due process, so yes.
I appreciate that. I'm saying if there's an instance in which law enforcement could have issued a
Okay.
red flag and did not, what recourse should an individual have, especially if something violent happens after the fact?
That's a very good question. I don't know what the recourse would be in a case where someone in light of the evidence, I mean, we're basically being asked to second guess the circumstances on the ground. So I suppose that could lead to an investigation if it was, very apparent to everyone else that the circumstances call for this. But it's hard to second guess our law enforcement who are literally, in the circumstances at that time. But it's a good observation.
But Governor, can you answer that question? If DA Soares is calling for a special session now, why would he do that if it isn't needed?
There's a cycle to the work we do. And to think that despite, all we accomplished months ago, that we're going to make a decision on whether or not it works in literally months. This was May 9th, this became effective. So I would ask the district attorney and others who are interested in this to continue the conversation that we are having. I don't have to meet with an individual district attorney. We meet regularly with the New York State District Attorneys Association. And if you ask them, they're very happy with the changes that we put as part of our bail laws, which now gave them back the power to not have an entire case thrown out of court, as had been happening under the previous bail changes. I fixed this as well at their request. The district attorneys sat down and proposed language that was changed in our budget as part of the bail reform that gave them the ability not to have a case thrown out whenever there's duplicative evidence and one piece is missing. There was a whole lot of cases being thrown out of court, and that has stopped. So,
I just had a quick question. What was your thought process for adding more officers to the subway when there was a similar attempt earlier this year to do a very similar thing and it didn't result in a reduction of crime? What was the thought process of yesterday's announcement?
I'm here to support the mayors on the ground. We're doing this with extra state police in Rochester and in Syracuse and in New York City. The state of New York oversees, runs the subway trains, but the city of New York is responsible for policing. But when there's a desire by the mayor to increase the ranks and have more of a visible presence, again, to deal with not always necessarily the factual side, but the fear side, what people are feeling. And people feel better. I talk to New Yorkers every single day. I walk the streets of New York. And people say, I'd like to see more police officers. Well, we can respond to that. And what I can do is my New York Transit, MTA Transit Police, I can bring them in and have them be fortifying our main transit hubs, Jamaica Station, they can be at Penn Station, they can be at Grand Central. They can show up there, and what that does is it frees up the police to literally go on the trains or on the platform. So all it is a cooperative effort to respond to, the high-profile instances which have created a sense of fear in people's minds, and that we're going to be out there. I think that's going to make people feel a lot better when they see that. That's only the genesis. What we had talked about in the past was setting in our SOS mental health support teams. That was the original press conference we did with the mayor back on January 6th, supporting his effort to increase the ranks, but also our effort and how the state and the city can work more collaboratively, which again has not happened before when it comes to dealing with the mentally ill, the severely mentally ill who need to be healing in a different place.
Okay, time for one more. Go ahead.
What were your thoughts about last week's ruling by Judge Sinatra saying that the state cannot bar people from bringing guns into houses of worship? And is that more evidence that this legislature needs to go back and revise the laws that we passed just back in June?
Again, I put this out there. It is so frustrating as the governor of the state of New York, responsible for public safety, and knowing that statistically, a state like New York, which has some of the toughest gun laws in the nation, has a much lower percentage of violence and gun-related crimes. Gun-related crimes are about 5 for every 100,000 in New York State. Okay, what does that mean? Put that in context. Mississippi, other states where they have much less restrictive and concealed carry laws don't exist. Everybody can carry a gun. It's about 25 to 28 per 100,000. So the data is showing that our tougher laws are working, respecting lawful gun ownership, but also protecting our citizens. And so that was disappointing. If you want my reaction, it was very disappointing. But we'll go back to court. We'll go back to court and continue to make our case, because I happen to believe, and I spend a lot of time in churches, 5 churches on Sunday alone, that people don't want to sit there and think that the person next to them is carrying a weapon. You don't know whether this is someone who's looking to do harm. We've had church massacres in Charleston. We had a synagogue massacre in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and that alone should send chills down your spine to think, how would it be if we'd actually let someone in the door? Welcome, come on in with your gun concealed. So we have to have common sense changes. We'll always go back, we'll refine. That's what we did after the Supreme Court struck down our law. The legislature came back, we made the changes, and now we're being challenged again. Nothing new here. I have very good lawyers, and we'll be back in court. All right, thanks, everybody.